India's economy is often described with two very different images. On one side, it is a global giant, one of the world's largest economies, a major consumer market, a leading pharmaceutical supplier, a rising digital power, and home to some of the planet's biggest stock exchanges. On the other side, it is still a lower middle-income country, where per capita income remains far below that of richer economies and hundreds of millions of people live in rural areas. This contrast is the key to understanding India. It is not simply a story of rapid growth, or poverty, or technology, or manufacturing. It is a story of scale. Because India's population is so large, even modest income levels can create a huge national economy. But that same scale also makes development difficult. Jobs, infrastructure, welfare, education, healthcare, and productivity must all improve for an enormous population at the same time. By 2026, India is described as the world's sixth largest economy by nominal GDP and the third largest by purchasing power parity, or PPP. Nominal GDP measures the size of an economy using market exchange rates, while PPP adjusts for differences in local prices. That distinction matters. A dollar converted into rupees can often buy more goods and services inside India than it could in a high-cost country. So India looks even larger when measured by purchasing power. But when the economy is divided by population, the picture changes. India ranks much lower in per capita income, around 149th by nominal GDP per person and 119th by PPP-adjusted GDP per person as of 2026. In other words, India is a very large economy, but it is not yet a rich one on an individual basis. To understand how India reached this point, we have to go back to independence in 1947. For decades, India followed a development model built around strong state participation, protectionist policies, and heavy regulation. The government played a central role in planning, licensing, investment decisions, and strategic sectors. This system was shaped by the priorities of a newly independent country, protecting domestic industry, managing scarce resources, reducing dependence on foreign powers, and building national capacity. But over time, the model became associated with slow growth, bureaucratic controls, limited competition, and inefficiencies. Private enterprise existed, but it often had to navigate a dense system of permissions and restrictions. Economic development was not absent, but it was constrained by a policy environment that favored control over flexibility. The turning point came in 1991, when India faced an acute balance of payments crisis. The country was struggling to pay for imports and meet external obligations. This crisis pushed India toward broad economic liberalization. The reforms reduced barriers to trade, opened more space for private investment, lowered some controls, and shifted the economy away from strict state planning toward a more market-oriented system. The change was not a complete withdrawal of the state. India still maintains substantial government participation in strategic sectors. But 1991 marked a new phase. Competition increased, foreign investment became more important, and Indian businesses began operating in a more open global environment. Much of India's modern growth story begins with this reform era. One of the most important features of India's economy is domestic consumption. Nearly 70% of India's GDP is driven by internal demand. This makes India different from some export-led economies that rely heavily on selling goods abroad. India's growth is powered to a large extent by its own people buying food, phones, transport, education, healthcare, housing, financial services, entertainment, and everyday goods. Because India has the world's largest population, its consumer base is enormous. Even if many households have modest incomes, the total market is massive. This is why India is consistently described as the world's third largest consumer market. The future of Indian growth depends heavily on whether more households can move into stable, higher spending income groups. The largest part of India's output today comes from services. As of 2025, the service sector accounts for around 55% of GDP. This includes information technology, finance, telecommunications, retail, education, healthcare, logistics, tourism, professional services, and government services. India became globally known for IT and business process services, building a strong reputation in software development, outsourcing, and digital support. The service sector has helped India integrate into the global economy without following the exact same path as earlier industrial powers. But there is a challenge: services can generate high value, yet not all service jobs absorb large numbers of lower-skilled workers. India needs both high-end services and broad employment opportunities if growth is to raise living standards widely. Manufacturing remains a major ambition for India. The country is the world's fifth largest manufacturer and represents about 3.2% of global manufacturing output. That is significant, but India's manufacturing share is still smaller than what many policymakers want for a country of its size. Manufacturing matters because it can create large-scale employment, build export capacity, strengthen supply chains, and support technological upgrading. India wants to attract investment as companies diversify production beyond existing manufacturing hubs. But manufacturing growth depends on infrastructure, logistics, land, power supply, labor skills, regulatory predictability, and integration with global markets. The opportunity is enormous, but so is the execution challenge. India's economic future may depend partly on whether manufacturing can expand fast enough to employ millions productively. India already has deep strengths in specific industries, especially pharmaceuticals and vaccines. It is often called the pharmacy of the world because it supplies around 1/5 of global pharmaceutical demand to more than 200 countries. India is also the largest vaccine manufacturer by volume, accounting for over 60% of global vaccine production. This is not just about low-cost production. It reflects decades of industrial capability, scientific talent, regulatory experience, and large-scale manufacturing systems. Indian pharmaceutical firms play a crucial role in making medicines affordable across developing countries. This industry also shows how India can compete globally when scale, technical knowledge, and cost advantages come together. It is one of the clearest examples of India's importance to the world economy. Another fast-growing part of India's economy is digital activity. India's digital economy was estimated at 11.7% of GDP, with its total value expected to surpass $1 trillion by 2029. This includes digital payments, e-commerce, software services, online education, platform businesses, cloud services, and government-backed digital infrastructure. India's scale gives digital businesses a huge testing ground. A product that succeeds in India may reach hundreds of millions of users. Digital payments and mobile connectivity have changed how many Indians interact with markets, banks, merchants, and government services. But digital growth also depends on closing gaps in access, skills, cybersecurity, and data governance. The digital economy can raise productivity, but only if its benefits extend beyond major cities and elite users. Rural India remains central to the economy. Nearly 63% of the population lives in rural areas, and these areas generate about 46% of Indian GDP. This means India's economic story cannot be told only through megacities, stock markets, software parks, and expressways. Rural households are consumers, workers, farmers, entrepreneurs, and voters. Agriculture is only one part of rural economic life. Rural India also includes construction, small businesses, transport, services, and remittances from migrant workers. Improving rural productivity is essential for inclusive growth. Better roads, electricity, irrigation, education, healthcare, internet access, and financial inclusion can raise incomes and expand domestic demand. If rural India becomes more productive and prosperous, the entire national economy becomes stronger. India is also deeply connected to global trade, though its economy is still largely driven by domestic demand. It has been a member of the World Trade Organization since 1995. As of 2025, India is the world's 7th largest importer and 10th largest exporter. Imports include energy, electronics, machinery, raw materials, and intermediate goods needed for industry and consumption. Exports include refined petroleum products, pharmaceuticals, textiles, engineering goods, software services, agricultural products, and more. India has free trade agreements with many countries and economic blocs, including the European Union, and participates in multiple international economic organizations. Trade policy is a balancing act. India wants global market access and investment, but it also wants to protect sensitive sectors and build domestic capacity. The financial and innovation landscape adds another layer to India's rise. The country has 2 of the world's 10 largest stock exchanges, ranks 39th in the Global Innovation Index, and 41st on the Global Competitiveness Index. As of 2025, it ranks 3rd globally in the total number of billionaires. These facts point to capital formation, entrepreneurship, and growing corporate power. But wealth creation exists alongside development needs. India is often considered a welfare state, and social welfare spending stood at 8.6% of GDP in 2022. The reported Gini coefficient fell to 25.5 by 2023, suggesting progress in income equality, although measuring inequality in a complex economy is difficult. The broader question is whether economic growth can translate into better public services, jobs, and living standards. India's economy is impressive, but it is also difficult to measure. The International Monetary Fund has challenged the accuracy of some Indian economic and inflation data, arguing that the informal sector and consumption may not be suitably incorporated. This matters because India has a huge informal economy, where many workers and small businesses operate outside formal payrolls, tax systems, and official records. If data misses parts of informal activity, policymakers may misunderstand employment, prices, income, and living standards. Still, the broad direction is clear. India is a giant developing economy with a powerful domestic market, strong service industries, global pharmaceutical influence, expanding digital systems, and huge manufacturing ambitions. Its central challenge is turning national scale into broad prosperity. If India succeeds, it will reshape not only its own society, but the global economy. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.